There's a lot of moving parts to everything that's going on right now. Tariffs from so many different angles, so many different countries are lashing out at one another. Everybody seems to have a bone to pick with Canada. Today, we find out who the new Liberal leader is and who our interim prime minister is. There's a lot of stuff going on. But when it comes to Trump specifically, I've been open and honest about this, even though I was on the media and I said that I'm a huge Trump fan, and I completely forgot that I had said that. I do like Trump. Yes, that is factually correct. But even I've had to ask myself, because Canada has invested quite a bit into our border with helicopters, with more patrol agents, with everything, right? Is this really about the border? What's going on? What's the bigger picture? And I've asked myself and asked friends on the phone this. Does Trump even know what he's doing? Like, this just seems wild and absurd. And of course, Trump knows what he's doing. But to someone like me, who's not at that level, does he know what he's doing? Welcome back to the channel. Welcome back to another video, everybody. Before we get into it, I do want to encourage you all to hit the like button and subscribe if you haven't already. It does really help grow the channel. There's an incredible CBC video that explains this. It answers this golden question. Does Trump know what he is doing when it comes to these tariffs? Because at what point is enough enough? When it first came out that we were going to get tariff because of our lack of border patrol, hey man, I'm all like for accountability, right? We have dropped the ball. Trudeau, the Liberals have absolutely ruined this country. We got fentanyl rampant in this country. But at what point do we get to the point where it's like, oh, okay, you still want to tariff us more, and there's more, and it's not going to end anytime soon. I don't know if I support that. Not that I ever supported Canada getting tariffed, but I do support us Canadians, our government, actually fixing our country. But now that we're on that path, what's up, America? What's going on? And so let's take a look here at this video, shall we? Buckle up, because it's going to answer a lot of things. Here we go.
First, they were on.
We will tariff and tax foreign countries to enrich our citizens.
25% on Mexico and Canada.
Then they were off.
President Trump's tariffs against Canada will now be put on hold.
Then, while the first set of tariffs were paused, Trump threatens a whole new second set of tariffs, and then threatens a third set of tariffs, reciprocal tariffs stacked on top. But eventually, he loops back to the first original tariffs, promising they're definitely coming.
On the tariffs, is there any room left for Canada and Mexico to make a deal before midnight? And should we expect those Chinese tariffs, the extra 10%, to take?
No room left for Mexico or for Canada. No, the tariffs, they're all set. They go into effect tomorrow.
And then those tariffs became real until they weren't anymore, because they were partially delayed.
We spoke with the big three auto dealers. We are going to give a 1-month exemption on any autos coming through USMCA.
And then a big chunk of what was left of the tariffs was paused again. Here's how Trump justified it.
And I spoke to the president of Mexico, wonderful woman, today, and we helped them out with the problem they were having to do with the tariffs.
I helped them out with a problem they were having, as in the problem he inflicted and then paused, and then re-inflicted and then paused. Are these the actions of a man who knows what he's doing? Maybe not, but maybe. There are two main schools of thought when it comes to how Donald Trump is managing the world's largest economy. Either the pandemonium is planned.
Yeah, I think chaos is a big part of Trump's strategy.
There's a term that applies to what the Trump administration is doing: weaponized uncertainty.
Or
another possibility is Trump just likes the attention, just likes the drama.
I don't think there's a genuine economic strategy behind it.
Let's start with that.
I mean, to be fair, that's what a lot of people are thinking now, right? There's a lot of people that are in this space that are like, okay, Canada needs to be accountable. And of course, our Liberal government has dropped the ball. And that's why you saw pretty much all politicians in Canada, except Danielle Smith, come out and say, no, we're not accepting tariffs. We're having a retaliatory response. But it's gotten to the point where even Danielle Smith is burnt out, and she's going, okay, we've tried to figure this out. We've tried to bridge the gap, but obviously America wants to roll up their sleeves, and so Canada's going to have a elbows up approach, which is a super weird thing. And so there's a lot of questions that just feel unanswered. Like if you're a Canadian, most of the viewers on this channel obviously are Canadian. At what point do we say, I think this is enough? And I feel like I'm almost there, if not already there. Maybe socially I'm not there, but in my heart, I think I absolutely am there. Like I get the initial, we're going to tariff you, we're going to tax you because of the borders, right? And the fentanyl and all that stuff. But at what point is enough enough? I just feel like we're missing the plot here. Maybe he's got a master plan, or maybe there's no plan. Let's see what the pros have to say about this.
The argument that Trump has no coherent plan is supported by the fact that he sometimes has no consistent point of view. Take tariffs, for example.
Canada's a very bad abuser also. Vast numbers of people to come in and fentanyl to come in.
Legally, Trump has justified tariffs by branding the influx of fentanyl from Canada and Mexico a national emergency. But is that really the motivation? Or is it about boosting American manufacturing?
We don't need trees from Canada. We don't need cars from Canada. We don't need energy from Canada. We don't need anything from Canada.
Sometimes it seems to be about the principle.
Subsidizing Canada to the tune of over $100 billion a year.
By the tune of about $200 billion a year.
And other times it seems to be more about power.
I'd like to see Canada become our 51st state.
He feels strongly that it would be very beneficial for the Canadian people to be the 51st state of the United States. They wouldn't be paying for these tariffs.
And what about the occasional lack of a unified message? Trump's own team sometimes seems left in the dark. Like whatever Trump was planning, if he was planning any of it, was never actually discussed out in the open. Take what Trump's Commerce Secretary said earlier this week on Fox News about tariffs against Canada and Mexico.
So I think he's going to work something out with them. It's not going to be a pause, none of that pause stuff, but I think he's going to figure out, you do more, and I'll meet you in the middle some way, and we're going to probably be announcing that tomorrow.
Except this was wrong. 2 days later, Trump did, in fact, issue a significant tariff pause.
We saw this a bit in the first term, but not nearly to this extent. But if you were to put a timeline of promises backtracking, it's just a zigzag pattern.
And this zigzagging isn't necessarily only a communication thing. Sometimes Trump's policies just aren't properly thought out.
President Trump has announced new tariffs on China that remove the de minimis exemption.
On February 1st, Trump issued an executive order that taxed Chinese imports under $800. For years, those imports had been duty-free. But then, 1 week later, Trump completely reversed course because there was no plan for how the U.S. Postal Service was supposed to suddenly process brand new taxes on the mountain of stuff Americans order every day from sites like Temu and Shein. Packages started getting backlogged.
Yeah, and by the way, we're supposed to now, in Canada, boycott Amazon, or maybe we're always supposed to do that. Temu, other places that come from China, because they've now threatened us, or not threatened, but they are implementing 25% tariffs on things that we export to China, like pork belly or whatever. There's a couple other items, right? Kind of crazy that everybody's just jumping on this tariff train and just taxing each other.
So now this order is on hold until they figure it out.
It's the whims of somebody who seems to change his mind as fast as the rest of us change our underwear.
There's the constant drama, impulse control. If you want to make the case that there's a master plan, what is that master plan?
And there are countless examples of this apparent lack of a master.
And I'm not suggesting that there isn't a master plan. I have absolutely no idea. I know that this is historically what Trump does, the art of war, whatever you want to call it. But as a Canadian who's on the receiving end of this, who's almost been defending Trump for quite some time with these original tariffs that were supposed to be just about the border, right? Accountability. We want Canada to secure the border. Hey, look, that makes sense. But now it's in the steel and aluminum and the auto sector, and he's delaying, but he's not delaying, but he's delaying. Like, it was just about the border and fentanyl, and now it's evolved into other things. And so it's getting harder and harder to, give a thumbs up to this, obviously, because it's coming at our expense, at Canadians' expense.
Plan, because many of the consequences that seem to invariably force Trump to take back what he says are foreseeable. The biggest example of this is how tariffs would affect the auto sector.
I'm afraid for both sides, for my workers, for the workers in the United States, but it's devastating. It'll devastate us.
Car manufacturing supply chains across Canada, the US, and Mexico are highly integrated and interdependent. Millions of parts and vehicles flow between the three countries every year, and economists predicted a 25% tariff would increase the cost to make each vehicle by thousands of dollars.
This industry has been integrated and grown together for decades. You can't unscramble the omelet one morning because you decide, you know what, you want to have a fried egg or a boiled egg. You made the omelet. You can't turn it into eggs over easy.
But it was only after Trump had dangled the threat of tariffs for 2 months and then actually enacted them that he decided, no, wait, I can't do that. I have to hit pause.
It's just a modification short term because I didn't want to hurt the American. It would have hurt the American car companies if I did that.
It was predictable to anyone paying attention to the details. I mean, the auto sector is so heavily integrated that, a piece goes back and forth multiple times. You can't build a car under these circumstances.
And the entire time Trump spends changing his mind, there's material harm to American businesses because they don't know which suppliers to use or what prices to charge.
What he's doing is he's creating uncertainty for people and companies that have to make pending investment decisions or future capital planning.
And consider one of Trump's most prized metrics for success.
Since my election, the stock market has set records. Everybody's stock has done well since the election.
But nowadays, asked by reporters whether his latest pause on tariffs had anything to do with stock market performance.
Well, no, nothing to do with the market. I'm not even looking at the market.
Because the market has slumped.
Stocks continue to fall today with fears of higher prices and
I mean, it's a bit of a minor setback. If you look at the S&P 500, it's down from 6,000. It's down to 5,700, which is where it was, 4 or 5 months ago. Like, it's not that big of a setback. We're not talking about a black swan event. But interestingly enough, the Canadian stock market, the TSX and individual, companies that make up what Canada is, right? Our energy sector, our banking sector is pretty much all we have. These have been relatively untouched. A little bit of turbulence, but not even half of the same turbulence that you've seen in the American economy. So that's kind of interesting. I don't know what that means. I have absolutely no speculative thoughts on that yet, but kind of interesting.
and escalating tensions.
He says, I'm not watching the market. I believe that as far as I could throw a Honda Civic, right?
That the one thing he will respond to is when the stock market goes down. The stock market goes down and he changes his mind.
But in the meantime, there is real economic consequences for doing this, for the uncertainty that consumers and producers take.
But let's talk about the second possibility here, which is that Trump knows exactly what he's doing. When you spend some time observing Trump, you start to notice more and more how he very clearly enjoys the persona that he's carved out for himself of being a disruptor. Like when he's naming those countries he believes treat the U.S. unfairly.
The European Union, China, Brazil, India, Mexico and Canada, have you heard of them?
Or when he's waving a pen at those same two economies who depend on the U.S. the most.
They've been in the news lately, haven't they?
Or when he calls the president of Ukraine a dictator and days.
So we absolutely do depend on America, and a little bit too much. Like Canada is not its own. I mean, I don't think there's really any country out there that's its own off-grid ecosystem where they don't rely on anyone for anything. I don't even know if that freaking exists in today's modern world. Even North Korea gets stuff from Russia and China and vice versa. I don't know what North Korea brings to the table in terms of trade, but there is no like self-sustainable country. Every country out there relies on trade with somebody else. That being said, Canada has been too reliant on America for too long. And this is a good wake-up call. I definitely can admit that just off of what the limited amount of knowledge that I have on this. America also, though, has like an insanely large trade deal with Canada. And that's what I've been trying to wrap my head around, is that we are the largest trading partner with America. And to just sabotage that with all of these ongoing tariffs and threats of, and it started with just the border, and it's compounded and compounded. And look, I get it, man. I hate Trudeau just as much as the next person. Thank God that guy's leaving today. I freaking get it. But at what point do we say this isn't really about our liberal government or liberal leaders? This is something else. I mean, if Pierre was in, would this same thing be happening? I mean, maybe he's doing it to Mexico. He's doing it to China. He's doing it to other countries, right? So that's kind of where I've become a little bit exhausted on this topic.
Later, jokes that he would never say such a thing.
Mr. President, do you still think that Mr. Zelensky is a dictator?
Did I say that? I can't believe I said that. Next question.
I do think that he thrives on the idea that we're having this conversation right now about what his strategy is here. I think he thrives on the idea that he's unwieldy and nobody really knows what's really going on.
Yes, it's this old paradox of how a bug is sometimes actually a feature. As in, Trump's leadership may not simply be a series of unforced errors, but rather an intentional set of moves designed to throw opponents off balance.
We see a lot of what they call the madman theory, you know, basically make yourself look so unpredictable that your adversaries don't know what to believe about you.
And let's stop to consider who Trump might consider his adversaries. Countries like Canada and Mexico, yeah, and maybe not just Canada and Mexico.
The United States has been ripped off by virtually every country in the world.
But also, he's increasingly singled out.
See, when he says stuff like that, now that this has had time to fester a little bit, it makes me believe that even if Pierre was in, or if there's an election called soon, when Pierre does win, hopefully he does, I don't think this has to do with any individual leader. He's the president of, I mean, kind of the world, right? America kind of runs the world to a certain extent, but he's president of the United States. I don't think he cares that much about who is prime minister in Canada. I don't think he's like really caring that much about our politics. He's governing almost 400 million people in this country and has to handle the world and all of the threats and turbulence that brings. I don't think he cares that much about who the leader of the country north to him is, right? Like it does. I don't think it makes that big of a difference to him. So these tariffs, it's so hard to say. There's so many moving parts and it keeps changing. He keeps delaying the tariffs and it's frustrating, not because he's delaying them, but because there's just so much happening and we get all pent up and it's like, oh my God, it's going to happen. Oh, not yet, not yet. Oh, here it comes. It's going to happen. Oh, not yet, right?
And used incendiary language against those companies that do business with other countries.
Well, a lot of them are globalist countries and companies that won't be doing as well because we're taking back things that have been taken from us many years ago. Basically, you have globalist companies that have been ripping us off.
And I'll explain where I'm going with this. Trump has always been transparent about one thing, that he wants American manufacturing to return to America.
America will be a manufacturing nation once again.
And he's always been clear, tariffs are a way of forcing those companies who would dare to make product outside of the U.S. to relocate, to set up factories, industries, to create jobs, to put America first.
He would, in his heart of hearts, like to have fewer cars built in Canada and Mexico and more cars built in Michigan and like North Carolina.
So what they have to do is build their car plants, frankly, and other things in the United States, in which case they have no tariffs.
And so there's a strategic line you can start to imagine where maybe you never actually have to apply tariffs to anything, because maybe the threat is enough.
He's essentially trying to intimidate or provoke some response that he thinks he'll be able to take advantage of.
And if that's the case, the rubber banding, the pendulum brinksmanship starts to make more sense if he thinks this is the most painless way to get what he wants eventually.
But he's not really getting that from Canadian politicians. They unanimously are on board with this. And I'm not saying that I agree with our politicians' response of a Team Canada, Canada First approach of retaliatory reciprocal tariffs. But man, there is not a single, the only politician that was deriving from that path was Premier of Alberta, Danielle Smith. And now she's thrown that out the window because these tariffs are actually coming on and there was nothing she could do to save Alberta's oil from tariffs or save Canada from the tariffs. And so every politician is on board with a retaliatory response. And I don't know if that's what President Trump expected, but I don't think so. I think he expected a little bit more division. That's interesting.
That the prospect of perpetual, unending uncertainty is too much to bear. So from industry's point of view, let's just do as Trump wants and move operations to the States.
He's a lot more willing to try things than your average politician. We've seen over the course of the last month and a half, his entire month and a half in office in the second term, that there's just less of a barrier there to trying things. The Republican Party has decided to kind of hand him the keys.
Now, to be both fair and clear, Trump's aggressive style has produced material change globally in a way that we haven't really seen under previous presidents. Just look to Europe as an example, how they're scrambling to shore up mutual defense and defense spending directly because of how Trump treats the NATO alliance. But turning back to tariffs, there are two complications with his strategy. The first is whether what he's demanding is even possible.
You can't move automotive plants in anything less than 5 years. You're going to have to close a plant. You're going to break the supply lines. You got to find new supply lines, find a new site, build a new plant, get your multimodal access and your power there. And that's $2.5 billion per plant that you don't have sales against to amortize that cost. These privately owned, publicly traded companies that begged him to pull back from the brink, he's going to bankrupt them before he gets what he thinks he wants.
And this is what's really been waking me up to this, is all of these things that he's saying that he's going to take away from Canada, and we don't need your oil, we don't need your lumber, we don't need your cars, we don't need your steel. I mean, okay, sure, I understand how the American patriotism could conflate with reality. They don't need it. They don't need it, but kind of, right? To redo all of your auto manufacturing, so it's all done in America, to redo all of your refining process for your oil and to just cut Canada out of that. And don't we export? Like, isn't most, like more than 50% of America's oil from Canada? Like what fills up their cars and their trucks and petrol and stuff like that? Doesn't that all mostly come, like 60% of it is from Canada or something of the sorts? Like, I could be totally wrong on that. Maybe I get fact checked down in the comments, but this is what's kind of waking me up a little bit to this is, sorry, President, but what the hell are you going to do you're going to inject? So you feel like you're losing out on jobs. So you're going to scrap these billions of dollars of trade deals to then have to spend between $500 billion and $1 trillion over the course of 5 years to recreate all of these plants, all of these jobs. I mean, by that point, your term will be done, and it's going to piss off a lot of people, right? And so I don't get it. Maybe somebody down in the comments gets it. Maybe I look like an idiot talking right now for not getting it. Totally. And that's absolutely possible, but I don't understand this.
The second problem is that there may be a point at which Trump's adversaries stop riding the roller coaster. Canada seems to want off.
As I always say, you touch a stove once and you get burnt. You don't touch that stove again. The only deal is drop the tariffs.
We're going to ensure that the Americans understand how pissed off we are.
We cannot live as Manitobans with a persistent threat of Donald Trump's tariff tax.
And consider how differently the federal government has responded to this latest pause compared to the first time. After Trump's first pause a month ago, the Prime Minister immediately pulled Canadian counter tariffs off the table. Trade war averted. Whew. But his response this time?
I can confirm that we will continue to be in a trade war that was launched by the United States for the foreseeable future.
Now, the Canadian government has withdrawn a future second wave of tariffs, but has decided to keep its current first wave on $30 billion worth of American goods in effect. And come Monday, which is in a few days from the time I'm recording this, Doug Ford of Ontario seems so far to be holding firm on his threat to jack up the price of electricity sold to Americans by 25%. So if Trump does indeed have a master plan, what comes next?
I don't know.
Okay, I do have to say, though, I'm at least a little bit pleased to see that he's raising the price of electricity by 25%. Because I mean, you want to talk about feeling the effects. Look, I'm not. Okay, let me reword this. I'm not pleased that he's doing that. I'm pleased that it's not shutting the power off like he originally threatened. So, okay, we've taken away the threat of a war crime, because there's no way he was going to shut off the power, bro. That's a freaking war crime. Like, that would give Trump the legal grounds to then use military power should he want to do something. Like, that is crossing a line. Increasing the cost of electricity by 25%, that's a trade war. That's what everybody is doing. I don't agree with it. However, if I had to pick the lesser of two evils, why did I say it that way? The lesser of two evils. That's a weird way of saying it. If I had to pick the lesser of two evils, increasing the cost of electricity by 25% for Americans, right, to 1.5 million, 1.4 million homes, that is significantly better than shutting off the power. Whew, we dodged a big one there.
Oh, I left my crystal ball in the other room. I'm sorry.
I don't know, and he doesn't know, which makes it very difficult to negotiate. How do you play that game when the rules keep shifting on an hourly, daily, weekly, monthly basis?
But I think we can make at least one prediction, that whether you think Trump is governing by impulse or has calculated his moves, whatever he says publicly has less and less value. Because when he says he's going to do something, maybe he will, and maybe he won't. Even signed agreements like trade deals stop being meaningful if the US president can simply decide unilaterally to violate them, or at least threaten to.
That was a pretty wild explanation. I don't know what's going to come of this, but at least Canada is moving away from threatening war crimes and just sticking to the trade war. Now, will Canada win this trade war? I don't think so. Will Canada cause harm and damage to the Americans or American economy and piss off American citizens? Yeah, probably. I mean, increasing your cost of electricity by 25%, that'll be pretty noticeable for a lot of people, right? 1.4 million homes, that'll be pretty freaking noticeable. And we haven't yet heard from President Trump about that. So when we do hear about it, he's going to probably match 25% on something else. And all of this seems unnecessary. If this was just strictly about the border, like the initial threat of tariffs were, then, you know, at least that's something that we can solve. But now it's evolved to beyond something that we can solve. And it's just about what he wants, which is taking jobs away from Canadians and bringing them to America, which is a nationalistic way of looking at things. And that's something that Canada has been wanting to do as well, at least under Pierre Poilievre. That's been Pierre's messaging. Let's do more for Canada by Canadians. That's part of what makes a leader's messaging great or good. I just feel like a lot of this is a little bit unnecessary, right? You don't have to build yourself up by tearing others down. And it's not the governments that are going to be paying this. It's going to be you, and it's going to be me. I'd love to know your guys' thoughts down below in the comments. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, it'd be super awesome if you smash the like button and subscribe. And I'll see you all later on. Bye for now.